We've all become, I think, much more aware of plastic waste. Stuff in the oceans, landfill mountains. But what if I told you there's a plastic problem that's way more personal? One you might literally be breathing in right now. Scientists are actually finding tiny plastic particles inside human lungs. It kind of makes you stop and think, doesn't it?
It absolutely does, yeah. For so long, the conversation around microplastics really focused on the environment,
Yeah.
waterways, the food chain. But this realization that we're also heavily exposed just through the air we breathe, well, that's a big shift. And frankly, quite concerning. It really opens up this whole new area of potential health risks that we need to understand.
Right. So in this deep dive, that's what we're getting into, this whole emerging issue, microplastic inhalation.
Yeah.
A potential 21st century health risk. Now, okay, when we say microplastics, what exactly are we talking about? Like, what are these things?
Okay, so essentially they're tiny, tiny fragments of plastic. We're talking less than 5 millimeters across, smaller than a sesame seed, maybe. And they come from, well, just a huge range of sources, things that are part of our everyday lives. Think about synthetic fabrics, in our clothes, or wear and tear from car tires hitting the road, even the packaging keeping our food fresh. And a big one is just the dust that settles in our homes that can be full of these microscopic plastics.
Mhm. So it's not just like industrial pollution floating about. It's actually woven into our modern lives. I mean, quite literally, with
Yeah.
clothes. And the real worry, as I understand it, is that unlike, say, pollen or regular household dust, our bodies can't easily, well, deal with these plastic bits.
Yeah, that's a really critical point. Our bodies have evolved mechanisms to handle natural airborne particles. We often break them down or, cough them out, expel them. Microplastics, though, they're synthetic polymers. They're much more persistent. They just don't readily degrade inside the body. And the concern is they can actually become embedded, like lodged in the delicate tissues of our lungs.
Which brings us to some pretty unsettling findings, right?
Yeah.
I read about a study, I think it was 2022, where scientists actually found these particles in people's lungs, live patients.
Yes, that was a landmark study, absolutely. Researchers looked at lung tissue samples taken from 13 patients who were already undergoing surgery for other reasons. And incredibly, they found microplastic particles in 11 of those people.
Wow. 11 out of 13.
Yeah, and what's also interesting is the types of plastic they found. For instance, they detected polypropylene.
Okay, like you get in what? Yogurt pots, food containers.
Exactly, that kind of thing. And also PP, the plastic used in drink bottles. It really makes you wonder about the journey these tiny particles take to end up deep in our lungs.
It really paints a disturbing picture, doesn't it? Just breathing in these minuscule bits of everyday plastic and having them essentially stick around in our respiratory system.
It certainly does. And it prompts some really serious questions about, the long-term effects. I mean, if you consider how much plastic we produce and use globally, and it's always increasing the potential for this kind of cumulative exposure over a lifetime, well, that's a big concern. We need to figure out how the body responds to this constant sort of low-level irritation.
Okay, so we've got the evidence there in our lungs. Now, what about the actual health risks? What are researchers currently investigating? What should you, listening, be aware of?
Right, that's the crucial question. And it's really important to say upfront that research into the specific health impacts of breathing in microplastics, it's still pretty early days. However, current research is raising concerns in a few key areas. Chronic inflammation is a big one. Your body sees these as foreign particles, right? So it triggers an immune response. But if it's happening constantly over the long term, that can lead to persistent inflammation in the lung tissue.
Okay, like a constant low-grade irritation.
Yeah.
And we know chronic inflammation isn't great. It's linked to all sorts of other health problems.
Exactly. That's one major worry. Another concern is the potential for just, well, physical interference with lung function. Now, it's probably unlikely that one single microparticle is going to block a major airway, but if you get a significant buildup over time, could that potentially impair how well the lungs exchange oxygen and carbon dioxide? That's a question researchers are asking.
Hmm.
And then there's something else which is quite important. Microplastics can act as carriers, like little delivery vehicles or vectors for other harmful substances.
Vectors like carrying what?
Exactly. So think about it. As plastics float around in the environment or even in our homes, they can kind of sponge up various chemicals, things like toxic additives used when they were made or pollutants they pick up from the air or water. They can also apparently harbor bacteria, even viruses on their surfaces. So when we breathe these particles in, we're not just inhaling the plastic itself. We could be delivering this sort of cocktail of other potentially harmful things directly into our lungs. That transfer of absorbed toxins and pathogens, that's another really active area of research right now.
That definitely ramps up the worry, doesn't it?
Yeah.
It's not just inert plastic. It could be like a Trojan horse for other, well, nasties.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've talked generally about where they come from. But are there specific places, especially indoors, where we spend, 90% of our time? Are there indoor hotspots for breathing this stuff in?
Absolutely. Yeah. In fact, some research suggests that the concentration of microplastics inside can often be significantly higher than outdoors,
Yeah.
especially in places with poor ventilation.
Really? Higher indoors?
It seems so, yeah. Think about the materials all around us in our homes. Carpets, especially synthetic ones like nylon or polyester, they can shed microscopic fibers constantly just from being walked on. Same goes for synthetic clothes or bedding, that cozy fleece jacket. It might be contributing to the microplastic load in your air.
So just like moving around my living room, wearing my clothes, could be releasing these particles for me to breathe.
Precisely. And it's not just fabrics, plastic furniture, some upholstery materials, even certain paints and coatings can release microplastics slowly over time. And poor ventilation is a really key factor. It just lets these airborne particles build up instead of being cleared out by fresh air. What's also kind of interesting or maybe ironic is that even vacuuming,
Yeah.
trying to clean up, if your vacuum doesn't have a really good filter, like a HEPA filter, it can actually stir up all that microplastic-laden dust and just redistribute it back into the air you're breathing.
Oh, man. It's almost a catch-22 then.
Yeah.
Trying to clean. And you might just be, in one specific way, making the air quality worst for these tiny particles. Okay, so given all this, it sounds a bit overwhelming, but what practical steps can people take? What can you and I and everyone listening actually do to minimize exposure in our daily lives?
Well, fortunately, yes, there are definitely practical things we can do, and some are quite simple. One of the easiest and probably most effective is just improving indoor ventilation, regularly opening windows, even for just a bit each day. Allowing that fresh air exchange can really help reduce the concentration of all sorts of airborne particles, including these microplastics.
Good old fresh air. Yeah, sometimes the simple solutions are still the best. Okay, what else?
Using air purifiers, specifically those with HEPA filters, can be really valuable. HEPA stands for high efficiency particulate air. And these filters are designed to capture really fine particles down to the sizes that include many of these microplastics we're worried about.
Right, the HEPA filters. Gotcha.
And when it comes to cleaning, like we just talked about with vacuuming, using a vacuum cleaner that does have a good filter, preferably a sealed system with a HEPA filter, is key. That way, you're actually trapping the dust and the microplastics inside the vacuum, not just blowing them back out into the room.
Okay, so better ventilation, better filtration for cleaning and purifying the air. What about the sources, the stuff in our homes shedding these plastics?
Yeah, that's the other side of it. Being more conscious about the materials we bring into our homes and wear can make a difference over the long run. So maybe opting for clothing, bedding, even furniture made from natural fibers when possible, things like cotton, wool, linen, hemp. They won't shed plastic microfibers.
Choose natural when you can.
Exactly. And for the synthetic clothes that, let's face it, most of us have and use, when you wash them, that's a big source of microfiber release. You could consider using things like specialized microplastic filters that can attach to your washing machine's outlet hose. Or using special laundry bags, like the Guppy Friend bag is one brand. These are designed to catch those tiny fibers during the wash cycle, stopping them from going down the drain, and eventually, potentially becoming airborne somewhere else.
Okay. Those seem like relatively straightforward changes, things people could actually implement that could add up. It really highlights how our everyday choices, even laundry, connect to these bigger issues.
It does, exactly. This whole issue really underscores how interconnected everything is. Our daily actions, manufacturing decisions, the materials we choose as consumers, even how we clean our houses, it all contributes. It's really shifted from being, just an environmental issue out there in the oceans to something that could be directly impacting our own personal health right here through the air we breathe.
Yeah, that is a significant shift in perspective, isn't it? From out there to in here, inside our own lungs.
It really is. And, you know, as the research in this area keeps growing, and it is growing fast, it's very likely that you, listening right now, will be hearing a lot more about microplastic inhalation and its potential health effects in the coming years. This is definitely an emerging field, and our understanding is going to keep evolving.
Okay, so to kind of wrap up what we've dug into in this deep dive, the main takeaway is that these tiny plastic bits in our lungs, it's not science fiction anymore. It's a current reality. And it's this newly recognized issue with, well, potential implications for our long-term health that we're only just starting to figure out.
That sums it up nicely.
Yeah.
Yeah. And perhaps the most important thing for you, the listener, to maybe think about right now is your immediate environment, the air inside your own home. Just being a bit more aware of the materials around you, maybe taking some of those simple steps we talked about to improve indoor air quality. That could certainly be beneficial.
It definitely gives you something new to think about, doesn't it? Goes way beyond just remembering reusable shopping bags. This brings the whole plastic pollution issue right inside our own bodies. Literally, the air we take in with every breath.
Yeah.
Well, thanks so much for walking us through this. It's been really insightful.
My pleasure. It's definitely a conversation that's going to continue. We'll be hearing more about this for sure.